Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today I want to, I was originally going to do the breakdown on Ordis' story, which I've been planning to do for a while, but considering we had all the stuff come out of Tennocon recently, some of which gives some real perspective to stuff that I commented on in my kind of roundup at the end of the sacrifice quest, as well as some other bits and pieces. There are a lot of lore implications to the things that are there, and so as a result I wanted to have a think about them and a kind of look through them in regards to maybe what we can expect from some of the stories, some of the answers we might get, some of the other stuff that's going on. Now, the first thing I just want to touch on is that they showed off two new Warframes that they're apparently working on concurrently, one of which is the Sentient frame, which now makes a little bit more sense to me than it did initially. Just because, again, the Sentient Warframe, the combination of a Technocyte-infected individual plus the connection to a Tenno, but then also wrapping the sentient aspect in there altogether. You know, it's a lot to contemplate, considering how separate the Warframes and the Tenno and the Sentients have been placed. You know, the Sentients are literally opposed to void energy in its entirety. You know, they have this it's this thing that damages them and prevents them from adapting, reproducing, and so on, and yet then you've got a creature that is directly controlled by a form of void energy in the sense that we transfer ourselves into it. Transference very much being a void-focused set of abilities to one extent or another. And so as a result, you know, it's interesting there, and I feel like possibly the Sentient Warframe, with everything that it's got rolled into it, is possibly too many concepts mashed together, but we'll have to see, and we'll have to see what the lore implications of that are. But I just wanted to point out that maybe it makes more sense than it did initially when I believe I first commented on it. Whether I commented in a video or not, I can't remember. But then, in regards to the other Warframe, the kind of murder geisha, this I think it was called Garuda, that is more of a finesse and gore Warframe from what was said, where if Valkyr is rage, then this is more just artistic murder. And so, as you know, that's going to be interesting to see, but at the same time, hopefully we'll see these Warframes coming in with quests. I'm hoping that the Sentient Warframe is an indication that even though we poked Ballas in the stomach with the pointy end of a sword, firstly we didn't poke him too deeply, but we did hurt him. Oddly, seemed to hurt him an awful lot, considering it was one small wound and he's essentially the closest thing in the Warframe universe to a god, bar ourselves and maybe the Sentients. So it's interesting to see how poorly or how badly he was injured and how poorly he took the pointy end, as it were. But at the same time, I'm hoping that the Ballas being the architect of the Sentients, him being him being the kind of the backing behind the Sentients, and then him also being the designer of the various Warframes. I'm hoping that we're going to see this Sentient Warframe as his next project, the kind of bringing together of his two greatest achievements as maybe a bodyguard that we potentially steal for ourselves. Who knows? But I'm hoping that it's an indication of us not seeing the end of Ballast just yet. As for the other one, I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe it's in some way connected to Venus. You know, we had Gara being released with the planes of Eidolon on Earth, and you know that kind of tied the Warframe story to the place, which was kind of nice. And we know that Warframes seem to be stationed in specific locations at times. So, you know, it'd be nice to maybe have the Murder Geisha Warframe being in some way connected to Venus. How exactly? Who knows? Considering that all we really got shown was a piece of concept art, it's hard to really say much more about that at the time. But you know, it's a world where there was a significant interest from the Orokin with their Weeping Towers and with whatever the other terraforming situations are on Venus, because the other Venus maps that we go and kind of land on are much clearer. They have much less weather. Potentially, if we're going to take what's in the game as a very straightforward, you know, this is the way that the planet is being used, kind of thing, then potentially we're looking at more of a situation where the Orokin had numerous different forms of terraforming tech. So, you know, certain areas you've got this mega storm, with the eye of the storm being a much lower temperature than the melting outside of on the other side of the storm front. But, you know, at the same time, then maybe you've got another larger, maybe more energy focused, a reverse greenhouse maybe of some description in some way that allows for the other maps on Venus that we actually go to be colder still. Who knows? But it's interesting to consider that as is, just in terms of the place. And as a result, though, then maybe that's where we're going to see this highly aggressive kind of death-bringing Warframe as a guardian of that place, a Warframe that was stationed there to protect the various most advanced forms of terraforming that can hold back the power of the sun at close range on a very strange planet, you know. But then moving into the stuff about Fortuna, this huge new open world map. You know, we've got the Weeping Towers, which is going to be interesting to find out about. We've got the coolant that's kicking around with the Orokin Techno fish swimming through it to manage the whole thing. But some of the stuff that stood out to me most about Fortuna wasn't the landscape and the other bits and pieces. It was the Solaris folks, the new people, the equivalent of the Ostrons, these indentured servants that are kept as indentured servants, working off their debt that they will probably never pay off thanks to interest rates that I imagine Nefanyud keeps incredibly high. They're all kind of technologically augmented, but the thing that stood out to me was just how many of them lack heads, and yet they are still completely fine. You know, they are still able to speak and think and act like a normal person. And we know that the Orokin had these capabilities because we have Ordis, and we have Suda, and we have Samaris, all of which, you know, we've seen be in some way, shape or form be referred to as people before they were then turned into Cephalons, which again I basically have the video finished for Ordis' story, which kind of shows this off the best, and that'll probably be the video that goes out next week. No, not next week because I'm away, but the week after. And so as a result, it's going to be interesting to see if we get any more information about how the corpus are digitizing people's minds, whether or not it's a rearranging of anatomy so that the brain is removed from the head and placed elsewhere, because those maybe a couple of the heads that these people, the Solaris folks have, would allow for a brain to be inside, but in many other instances their heads are very narrow or very, very kind of pointed, and so as a result you wouldn't really fit a brain in there in any decent way without it being pretty horribly damaged. So it's going to be interesting to see if we find out more about how those people were augmented, or even, I can imagine that in a fair number of cases it was more you have been horribly injured by the menial labour that you're having to carry out, and so as a result, yes, you had to have something replaced. There are numerous Solaris folks walking around with mechanical arms and legs and things like that. But the head is something slightly different, and where I doubt the corpus are using Kuva to do so, as the Orokin did, or seemingly did, but it's still going to be interesting to see how they managed it. And we know that the corpus do have access to cephalons. For instance, Jordis seems to be installed in a corpus ship, and so as a result it's interesting to consider just how much the corpus have access to the same kind of mind capturing technology that the Orokin might have done, how much they can integrate with things like cephalons and make those things work. But then also it's going to be interesting to consider whether, what happened to those poor people's heads. Are the children that are running around going to become augmented to the same extent sometime? Is there a point at which they lose their head? We've learned a lot about from the lore entries and from some of the things that we've seen and heard. We've learned a fair amount about the Ostron culture in Cetus, so that's going to be interesting. But then we're going to hopefully see more of these Solaris folks and find out what's happened to them, why they're like this, who took all their heads away, all that kind of thing. But then the other element of Fortuna that I'm kind of looking forward to story-wise is the fact that we've got Nefanyo back, and from the corpus as a stereotypical corpus, because when you look at, say, Alain V, he was very much a kind of outsider, and he was very determinedly an outsider, where he would work his way up the chain and then set himself apart, rather than Nefanyo, who has embraced the core of whatever it means to be corpus, and their focus on profit and money and worship of the kind of Orokin society that is long gone, and the remembrance of things and all that kind of stuff. We've got him back. We've got him back for an entire set of reasons around this planet. And I kind of wonder if maybe we find ourselves in Nefanyo's debt, or he feels that we're in his debt even if we're not. And that's how we find our way to Fortuna in the first place. We get picked up, got told that we have to earn off a debt, and then we get dumped on the planet. There's probably a realization that it won't keep us there, but I would hope that there's a quest, like with the Plains of Eidolon, that kind of leads us into Fortuna, and as a result, I'm hoping that Nefanyo plays more than a passing role in this, because where we've got kind of Vehek on Earth with Cetus, and he occasionally just moans about something going on, that's all very well and good. But we've got a whole load of different issues on the Plains of Eidolon that are different from what we're seeing on Fortuna, because Fortuna does seem to very much be the interest of one guy. But otherwise, he's the stereotypical kind of poster child for the kind of Corpus society. And so I'm hoping to see more of that. I'm hoping to see greater explanations around certain things with the Corpus that so far, because the Corpus kind of heroic characters, or I say heroic characters, the elite characters, they've been kind of lacking. You know, we've got a few that have been expanded upon, like Ambulus, for instance, being a much more advanced version. You actually have Darvo's dad, I believe, talking to you instead of it just being the Ambulus unit kind of grumbling at you. You know, that's something that they expanded on there, but then in regards to certain other characters, the Sergeant, for instance, they are kind of lacking in regards to personality. They don't really tell us anything about who they are, what their place is in Corpus society, how they got to that place, and so on. And the two best that we have are Alad V and Nefanyo. Alad V deliberately puts himself apart from the rest, and Nefanyo is kind of the poster child for it, so I'm hoping that we get more from that. Now, the next thing that they showed off was the new Railjack stuff, and as much as that seemed to very much be more in the way of kind of gameplay, there were a few things that stood out to me as big lore questions that come out of that piece of gameplay. First off, finally we're seeing more of the Tenno Warfleet, because my god, were we never going to have been able to fight the old war with just Lissettes, just Scoutcraft. You know, even if they've got orbiters that can prepare us for everything, when you've got huge serpent ships that can, you know, or so-called serpent ships from the Sentients that can wipe out potentially a decent chunk of a fleet by themselves, you know, it's a case of going, yeah, we needed something more than this, and a 4-man gunship is a good start. Now, the thing is, I've heard people going, oh great, now we've got a ship that can take us all the way to Tau if we can find a rail that will jump us from one to the other, because the Railjack seems to, with its big drive unit on its back, link into a solar rail and launch itself off, the same way that a fair number of other ships, I can imagine, would do so as well. But it doesn't need a solar rail platform there to do it. It kind of has one mounted on its back, so it can just launch itself. It can create its own mini rail, if you like, and project itself along it. But as a result, I'm hoping that this is the expansion that we'll see to show off kind of how we're going to get to places, where we're going to go. And I'm hoping that as we do seem to be slowly moving towards the Tau system, I'm hoping that the equivalents of relays in the Tau system will be proper Tenno cruisers, warships, the kind that have to be hidden somewhere around the system, but which just currently aren't. You know, there's been a small mention a long time ago about introducing NPCs into your dojos and things. What I'd like to see would maybe be us having to do missions to recover parts of the Tenno fleet, and then as a result of recovering things like Tenno warships, Tenno cruisers, personnel and ship carriers and all those kind of things, that then we can adopt those either as a dojo manufacturing one for themselves, so that you have the dojo in the Origin system, and then you have a clan cruiser in the Tau system, and actually having a crew of some description that's there. I realise now I'm kind of talking about stuff I'd like to see as well, but I feel like we're not, you know, you could turn up with an entire fleet of those 4-man Sigma series Railjack gunships, and you're not going to be able to fight a war. if you've got no base of operations, if you've got nowhere to repair, and so on and so forth, nowhere to resupply, you're going to run into problems. And so we are going to, on entering the Tau system, before we can before we can achieve a foothold there, we are going to need more firepower and more mobile bases for us to move into that space, realistically speaking. And so I'm hoping that that's not something that DE overlook, because they're, especially with the idea of a new war beginning, a kind of second sentient war. Yeah, I'm sat here going, there are so many stories to tell in that kind of environment, and there have been a few missed opportunities, a few vagaries, and just things missed in my mind from some of the writing and some of the missions and some of the things from Warframe. Anyway, they just haven't been capitalised on as well as they could have done, or they've done a thing and they wanted to move on very quickly instead of elaborate or expand on things. And we can't remember the old war. As characters, we can't remember it. And so us having this new war gives us both the potential, or gives DE the potential to tell us the story of both the facets of this new war that we are going into, but also allows us to recall the moments from the war that we were in before, because we are basically fighting the same enemy for the same reason. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how they move forward with this. But one of the things, along with these other mechanics and these other bits and pieces that I'm drawing lore from by asking questions and kind of pointing out where things are going to kind of go with these, we've also got the new cinematic quest that they teased, the new war, where lots of people were saying, oh, that's the Tau system. No, the system that you see at the beginning of the trailer is the Origin system. It's Earth, but it's just from very, very far out. Lotus and her seemingly significant armada, I say Lotus, Natar, and her significantly sized armada of sentients that are sat out there, seem to be in the Oort cloud. They seem to be outside the solar system by a significant margin, out in the dark. And first off, there are an awful lot of sentients there. Now, so far, we've seen the Eidolon's forces, where they're kind of ruined and broken. We've seen Hun Hao's forces that seem to be his personal vanguard and not much else. We've seen Ballas's mimics, the mimics that kind of accompanied Ballas to one extent or another, dotted throughout that one section of Lua. And so, we've got a collection of interesting sentients, but never a full army, never a full armada. And I can't help but think that the sentients that were there with Natar are possibly the forces left there by Hun Hao for Natar's use to then wipe the Origin system clean after she has sent the children to sleep, after she had used the Warframes to kill the Orokin, and then just making it a case of using that armada that's been stashed there to finish off the job. But you've got Natar, who's feeling very lost, kind of confused, kind of to the extent that the more resolute line that she gives us about returning to her mother at the end of the sacrifice isn't everything that's going on in her head. And she didn't want to go back to Hun Hao's interface with Hun Hao or interact with him in any way, because this would happen, because she would lose the self that she wanted to be and become the self that she was by nature. And it's an interesting story that they could tell here between the being a person that you want to be versus being the thing that you are. And they could make that a very interesting story. Will they? I don't know. But we hear the mother's voice, and it's very raspy and whispery, and it's probably supposed to sound like that because it's over a great distance from a long, long way away. But we know that the Natar is Hunhau's child and was born of his womb. That's what he tells us. In which case, I'm wondering if the mother might be the sentient seeding ship, or whatever it is that you would like to call it. I've shown you guys concept art of before, which gave birth to all sentience. So it's not just her mother; it's the mother of sentience from Tau. It's the mother of monsters, if you like. You know, gave birth to all of them in one. In several batches, as it were.
Life support incoming.
But she says that we used her, that we seduced, we used Natar, we seduced Natar, and we stole her fire. And then Lotus is confused and doesn't know what to do, and it seems somewhat conflicted, and she's told by her mother to take her fire back. Now, what can we draw from this? Well, the only thing that Lotus lost, because we didn't use her, she volunteered. She volunteered her services at the direction of her father. We didn't seduce her. She decided that she wanted to be a mother to us rather than to the other sentients and things. You know, she wanted that maternal environment, that maternal feeling for her to inhabit. And she didn't do a great job of it, and if anything, especially more recently, she's been a hindrance to us rather than actually a help. But it's a case of that's what she wanted, and so we didn't really seduce her either, so there's some twisting going on here. But when it says that her fire was taken away, well, the only thing that she actually lost was her capacity to reproduce by travelling through the void. Which again wasn't the fault of the Orokin or anything else. It was the fault of the people of Hunhau and the mother and whoever else sending her through the void to come and do the job. But it's interesting to consider again that the only thing that's really been taken from her was her ability to reproduce. And Lotus, like us, knows that the only thing that can bring that back seems to be the Unum's Temple Kuva. Exactly why the Eidolon attacked Cetus and the plains of Eidolon in the first place. And so as a result, the Unum, I'm still feeling, yes, has this interesting counterpoint where I feel like the Unum is the original control tower for the release, for the launch of the sentience towards Tau in the first place. But, more to the point, it is now going to be a place that we are going to have to defend as this war gets off the ground and gets into full swing. Because Lotus is going to need whatever comes for the Temple Kuva to restore herself, because otherwise she's not going to be able to make a particularly convincing trip back through the void to get home anyway. But also, if she wants to fight a war within the Origin system with us, she's got her sizable armada there already, but she's going to need more, and to get more, she is going to need to reproduce, and as a result, she's going to need to restore her reproductive capabilities, and there's only one way to do that we are at least currently aware of. So the last part of that, though, that comes into my mind, is that the next thing that's going to happen is we are going to lose. Recently, we have gone from strength to strength. We have won time and time again. You know, we beat the Grineer Queens. We beat Alice. You know, we've gone from kind of strength to strength to strength. But there's one problem with that. We can't go from strength to strength and still then have the war continue to grow, and also for us to have a reason to actually go out to the Tau system, which seems to be the direction that they are heading in. We aren't going to be able to have a good reason to go there to deal with any of this stuff in any convincing manner unless we lose next. Lotus, or Natar, is going to have to beat us. She's going to have to restore her reproductive capabilities, or at the very least provide her, find her a way for her to travel to Tau without having to just float through mundane space. And, all that in mind kind of points to the next big story point, the next big kind of plot moment being a loss for the Tenno. We might beat Nefanyo, we might gain our new Railjack ships, we might gain more of a fleet than that, whatever, but it's going to get to a point where we're going to have to lose, and we're going to have to lose substantively, because it's probably going to mean not just losing a chance of restoring Lotus in the near future and finding out what's gone on, but also it's probably going to mean us losing significantly to Lotus. It's going to be, we're going to have an objective to protect something like the Unum, probably the Unum, and we're not going to be able to. We're going to lose. And especially if Ballas is still around, then he's going to be able to provide Lotus with even more insight, even more access than we have, considering the closest equivalent that we have in terms of a living Orokin would be Teshin now, and that he doesn't have nearly as much to offer in terms of information and help. So, as much as I would like to see a Grand Admiral Teshin taking a strategist role as part of a fleet of Tenno ships, that's probably a fair way off, because the next thing that's probably going to happen is, in terms of the big story points, is we're going to, unfortunately, have our, at one point, ally and mentor Lotus, now Natar again, beat us to the punch and get her way, leaving us in the dust. And then we're going to be playing catch up as the next probably couple of story points afterwards. That would be my guess anyway, based on what we've seen and some of the reveals that are coming out of or the reveals that came out of Tennocon this year. But anyway, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about the new things, the new mechanics, the new stuff that's all being added? I'd love to hear if you've got your own theories as well and other bits and pieces that are going on. But otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and found it interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.